You're listening to the Mindshift podcast. We have a very exciting new type of formatted episode today. We are letting you into the behind the scenes of a new type of arena space that we've just created. It's an arena for pastors and leaders that are in the ministry space, in the church space. That is something that's very dear to our hearts. Dad, you and I have built the arena business for the last almost like three years.
Yeah, 3 years.
It's been very exciting. But we wanted to create an easier on-ramp for people who are in church space, ministry space, who are leading at a high level. So you called some of your friends like Eric Johnson, Tim Ross, Tim Moore, only Tims, and just invited them into the space where it's $99 a month. It's a 1-2 hour call a month. It's at noon on a Tuesday with some of the greatest leaders on earth, where you're just talking about ministry, talking about church, talking through the scriptures, prepping for different big Sundays. And I think it's a really amazing space. It's an hour of content, an hour of Q&A. It always kind of adjusts depending on like how long you guys go and have a conversation versus how long people ask questions. But it's in a really special space, and I think it lines up really in the best way with this new release of your new book, which your new book is the 20th year anniversary of The Barbarian Way, which is beautiful. Unleash the Untamed Faith with Erwin McManus, Choosing a Dangerous Road, The Barbarian Way. And it's been 20 years since you released this. I was 16. And so we kind of did an homage cover because you had like a photo shoot in downtown LA.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
So me and the team went down and we shot the cover, and I'm very excited to be re-releasing such an important book.
Oh, I'm so excited too. And I'm excited about this new space in the arena for pastors and ministry leaders. What's also interesting is the arena is really focused in the business space, but almost everyone has a deep faith, and they have a lot of faith questions in there. And in some sense, I see some of the people signing up for this new space, and they're in the business space. They just want to grow in their leadership from a biblical context, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, you had created something. We had created something, but you really were the primary driver and host of this. It was the Arena Mastermind, and it was like 20, 30 business guys who paid, I think it was like $35,000 to be a part of this team. And we found that we were like baptizing people again and again, and it was like really cool to see people come to Jesus, come to faith, and really experience like their life through the lens of Jesus and the scriptures, which is really cool. And that wasn't necessarily even the intention. Like that's how we live our lives, but that wasn't the intention of that space. It was just to like get guys who are going through unique seasons of life, either in business or personal or spiritual, and just bring them together, have community, also talk through some of your high level ideas, and really coach people. Yeah. So this space with the arena pastor space it's some of the best, I think, going to be some of the best content, some of the best community, and people get access to a WhatsApp group, which essentially is just other pastors around the country, around the world, and we're very excited to be launching this thing. So when you're watching this episode, know this is a conversation we are going to have on Zoom with other pastors around the world, and we're very excited. So if we want to invite you to the arena. We want to invite you to buy The Barbarian Way.
And we're going to invite you into the experience for today's podcast.
Right now.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
See you guys at the end. Good morning. It's a beautiful day here in Los Angeles. Our first arena pastors and ministry leaders call. Guys, we're so grateful to have you guys on here. Few familiar faces, a few new faces. Dad, I just wanted to let you start this off and jump in and do your thing.
Man, I am so excited to see everybody today. It's kind of some of our community from the arena is here, and we're starting a new flavor of the arena. You know, when we've been doing the arena for business leaders and entrepreneurs for the last 3 years, obviously so many of us, central to our life is our faith, our relationship with Jesus. We build our life and our futures through the scriptures, and then we apply it into the domain of work. But even in that space, several have been pastors and on ministry teams. And we just thought it'd be really great to be able to take 2 of those 4 hours and focus on the same kind of principles. If you're new, we in the arena, we focus on leadership, communication, character, and big ideas, which I just wrote in my own little notes, intelligence, like increasing our organizational intelligence about all the things in life. And it's a basic triangle that we have in the arena. We're going to keep that here. We're just going to lean a bit more into 2 things, extracting from the scriptures the principles that we talk about, which we do not usually do in the arena space. And the second one is very, very clear focus on the areas of ministry and the church and what we do together to expand God's kingdom. And sometimes that can actually be in the workplace. And so I think it's interesting. Some of the people signing up here are entrepreneurs who want to apply their faith in their world. So I think it's going to be a great blending, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And if you're here for the very first time, we're so grateful to have you come. We've talked, Aaron and I have talked about for over the last 3 years, how do we open up the space to some degree for those who are in ministry who maybe cannot afford membership in the arena. And this is one of the ways that we've been able to solve this problem. One of the differences is that this space, we're building it in a constellation of voices and leaders that we know can be super helpful to you and invest in your life. So I just kind of reached out to some of our friends that have been in the arena and outside. So we're going to be hearing over the next year from leaders like Eric Johnson and Tim Moore and Tim Ross and probably Javen Chavez and Joshua Kraft, and we're just gonna keep expanding some of those leaders and experts that can speak into the community, which I think is will be great. And of course, I'll be there, so hopefully I'll make a contribution or two along the way. And but more than anything else, we want it to be very, very user specific. We want to really help you in your personal life and in your work life and your ministry life. And so that's why we're doing 2 hours. One of the things we found in the arena so oftentimes is we were going way past the hour. And then two, we left so many questions unanswered. And so many times Aaron would have to send me a text, answer faster, answer faster, answer faster. We have too many questions, too many questions. This way we can kind of breathe and allow the conversation to develop. For today, I did make an invitation very specifically, but I'm going to kind of open up a little bit, and I'm going to ask Eric Johnson to join us and to speak a little bit from his own story, which I think is very, very unique. Being born into a family that has led one of the most iconic churches in the United States, Bethel, and growing up in that very, very unique and particular culture, then becoming the senior pastor of that church for, I think, around 9 years or so. And then from there, going to the East Coast, literally going across the country and planting a church in Greenville called Studio. And I've asked him to kind of share a little bit of the learning and leadership insights he's gained, both from pastoring an established church with a huge legacy, and then starting a church from scratch in a new city. And so we're going to get to that in a few minutes. But Aaron, you'll be really proud of me. I'm going to mention the Barbarian Way, and because there is a part of me that wants to start what we're doing at the arena here. Today just happens to be the launch date for the 20-year anniversary of the book. And it's been very interesting to me to grapple with the context in which I wrote that book, and then to ask the questions of, how do I see the world, 20 years later? And I was sharing on our podcast we're going to send to our Mindshift community, how ironically 20 years ago when I wrote the Barbarian Way, I had the same agent, the same editor, and the same publisher as John Eldredge, who at the same time I wrote Barbarian Way, he wrote Wild at Heart, which of course became like a runaway bestseller in the world. And John was in his limousine about to go to the award show for books. And he said, hey, hop in with me. So we hopped into the limo together and we drove over to the book award event. And because the book was called Wild at Heart, I thought it was identical in many ways to the Barbarian Way. I thought, well, these are like complementary books. And I realized they actually were diametrically opposed books, and not complementary, but in many ways, like seeing the world completely differently. And I had a brief conversation with John. I said, hey, John, would love for you to come to LA and speak into our world there. And he goes, I'm never coming to LA. I come from California, never going back to the city. And it kind of caught me off guard. And I said, but LA really needs your voice. And he goes, no, I live in the mountains. And in fact, I built a house in the forest, and the only thing that upsets me is that I can look out the window and see the city lights. I didn't even want to see the city down below. And I said, but John, you don't want to escape into the woods. Humanity needs your voice. And he said, I love trees. And I said, but Jesus didn't die for trees. And that was our early conversation between me and John Eldridge. And I realized that what John was saying at Wild at Heart was pretty much, find the life, find your space, your freedom, your heart, and and the application of that is go to the woods, go out to nature, go fly fishing, live a life in a sense that it felt like Thoreau and Walden. And live a life that escapes the harsh realities of the world around us. And my book, was like, no, relocate into the harsh realities of humanity, and go to the most insanely intense, dangerous, oppositional space, and press against the edge of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of darkness, and I realized that the messaging was so dramatically different. And frankly, I'm really attracted to John's message in many, many ways. And I love John Eldridge. So I'm only using his name and telling the story because it's real. And it was in the same moment in history, seeing our expression of faith in a very, very different way. And it was like awakening the heart was a commonality in some sense. But if you look at the Barbarian Way, the awakening of the heart was to fight for the heart of the king, and in the Wild at Heart is like discovering your heart and living your wild, beautiful existence. I can tell you that there've been many times in my life I kind of wished I had taken his path instead of mine, and because a lot of assumptions get made when you choose this particular path, that either it's what you like more than the other, or you don't love nature, or you don't love peace, or you're not tempted by the beauty and wonder of a safe and predictable life, and all that still does have an attractiveness, to me, and I think to all of us, to some degree. I didn't choose LA because I thought it was the prettiest city in the world. I chose it because I thought it was the epicenter of the fight that I was supposed to be in. I didn't choose being a pastor because I have a nurturing instinct. I chose being a pastor because I thought it was a battle enlistment, and it's a very, very different kind of like mentality. And I didn't see the church as a place where people came to escape the world, but the church is a place where people are mobilized to impact the world. And so it's a very, very kind of different mental construct. And, so it just, since it happens to be the right timing, I'm going to assume there's a little providential timing to this, that the beginning of our story of moving forward in this arena, because I love the concept of the arena. And for those of you who are new, me, Aaron, and I think Austin, was it you? We were all riding bikes together, and we were coming up with the idea of creating the arena for business leaders and entrepreneurs. And I said, I've got the name. I know what we should call it. And they said, what? And I said, we should call it the Acropolis. I can't even pronounce the name. And the Acropolis, because I always come up with some obscure, bizarre, way out there kind of idea. And Aaron, never missing a stroke on the bike, said, no, I think we should call it the arena. And so the Acropolis lost to the arena because my gift isn't to have the best idea. My gift is to be able to identify the best idea. And I knew it was a far more powerful imagery, and it was the right imagery we were looking for. And it was later when even the quote from the man of the arena came to the forefront, and we thought it's just a perfect concept, because we want to be the people who want to be in the fight. We want to be in the battles, and we all want peace. And I pray for all of you that you have peace and blessing, and that you have times of incredible joy and celebration in your life. But a huge part of what I hope this space can do is give you the strength to fight the biggest battles, give you the tools to make the greatest impact, and give you the character to not be crushed under the weight of failure and success. And so I just want to invite you to join us even as we dive into this into this revisiting of the Barbarian Way. 20 years later, I look back and I go, yeah, I chose a much harder path, but I'm really grateful for it, and thankful that I got to be a part of this journey. And part of what I wanted to talk about today a little bit, and I'm going to circle back to it after I open up the mic just a little bit, because I think it's really important to learn from each other's stories. And I would love for Eric Johnson right now. Eric, would you just take a few minutes, introduce yourself to the community? Thank you, Eric, for being one of the contributors in the arena. We're so excited to have your voice, your wisdom, your journey as a part of this community. I know you could talk for 2 hours. And by the way, you're going to have to at one point. But today, could you kind of give us a little insight into your journey?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's an absolute honor to be in this group. This is exciting to be with a group of people, pastors and leaders and people that really care deeply about what God's doing on the earth and in churches and spiritual communities. So it's an honor to be here. And so I look forward to what's ahead for all of us and getting to know you guys. And then Erwin and Aaron, thanks again for just being champions of faith in today's climate. I mean, you guys have just been some of the forerunners in that and been so inspirational to me. My story, I am approaching 50 years old. I'll be 50 next year. And I have 2 adult daughters. One is married, and my wife and I just celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary. And we are approaching almost 30 years of being in a church ministry role. And so it's funny to look back the last 30 years, and I feel like I'm now getting to a place where I can genuinely say, I think I have some things to give. And I always love when people, they tell you how to raise kids, but they only have a teenager. I'm like, you need to get through the teen years first before you have anything to say about raising kids. And so I think for me, it's like, okay, I feel like I have things to share. So I'm looking forward to this, be in this space. My background is unique in regards to my dad's side of the family. I'm 6th generation pastor. And my mom's side of the family, I'm 5th generation Christian. And then you go to my dad's mom, so my grandma, she passed last year. I'm 5th generation pastor. So it's just everywhere. So my entire world as a kid was, the joke was, you have 5 options in life: apostle, prophet, pastor, teacher, or evangelist. And that's a joke. That was never the case. But just being raised in the church my whole life. But I had this really deep curiosity about the world outside of it as well. And I think that's an important part of my journey, because I was raised in it, but I was always asking the question, why is there a gap between church and culture? Why is there a gap between church and the world? And so my entire life has always been driven by that curiosity. I first started as a youth pastor at a small church in the mountains, a city of town of 3,000 people. So I know, and I grew up in that church. And so I know what it's like to be in a really small environment in the mountains where the main industry is lumber and forestry. And so that's my childhood. I grew up in the John Eldredge dream in the mountains. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And it was special, but I honestly was excited about going to the world and going to cities. And so that's why I spent my entire life traveling all over the world. But I started pastoring in that context. And then I eventually moved to Redding, California, which is where Bethel is. And I was on staff there for about 18 years in total. And about 9 or 10 years, we were the senior pastors of the church there. And when we took over the church in 2011, and over the next 10 years, it grew from about 6,000 people to 12,000 people. And for me, that just speaks to how do you build a culture and build systems and processes and leadership dynamics in a fast-growing environment where you have 20 to 30,000 people on a low year visiting your church. So it's just so much going on in that. And so we were there up until 2021, and then, as Erwin said, we felt like the way I can describe it, the grace was lifting. It was time to do something else, which blew everyone's mind except just a few friends, Erwin being one of them. And everyone had told us, why would you leave? You've made it. You've arrived. You've made it to the pinnacle. You're leading this significant church, not just a local church, but a global church. Why would you ever leave that? And I said, if you think that's the pinnacle of ministry, then I think you have a very skewed view of ministry. And so we made a drastic change. We resigned. Interestingly, it was actually 5 years ago, right now, we resigned. And we stepped down, and we had no idea what was next. And, people around us begged us, why don't you just stay on a little longer and get some clarity on the next step? And we said, we feel like we're supposed to do what Abraham did. We're supposed to just say, we don't know where we're going, but we know we can't stay here. And so we stepped into what I loosely call a dark hallway. It wasn't dark in an evil sense. It was dark in the sense that I have no idea what's ahead. So we spent a number of months just kind of doing time off and praying and seeking God. And very long story short, we ended up in Greenville, South Carolina, a city I had no idea existed 5 years ago. I knew South Carolina, but I'd never heard of Greenville. I've heard Atlanta, I've been to Charlotte, I've been to all those cities, Charleston, but never heard of Greenville. So we knew nobody in that city. And so we started doing these trips out there and started visiting it. And each trip, it felt like we were dating a city. We were entering into a relationship. And after one of those trips, it felt like, we're going to get married to this city. Is there anything else we need to know before we make the commitment? So that was just kind of our process. And so in June of 2021, we moved there. And then about 5 or 6 months later, we opened the doors on a Sunday. And we're about to approach 4-year anniversary in January. So I think from my experience, I'm excited to be of help and of benefit. I feel like I have a wide-ranging experience from pastoring a small church in the mountains to pastoring a massive global church and now planting a church. And so there's just so many leadership dynamics in there. And so, but that's a little bit about myself. And Erwin, I don't know if there's anything else you want me to dive into, but that's kind of an introduction of my world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. I am going to ask you a couple questions. I also noticed that Pastor Kevin Liu is here from Kuala Lumpur, and he's part of our leadership team and going to be contributing over the year. It's like, I think, 3:00 in the morning in Malaysia. So, Kevin, are you there? Are you awake? And are you able to verbalize anything?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Am I clear?
We can hear you great.
My name is Kevin. I started a church back in 2001, which is about 24 years ago, in a city called Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It is a city where a lot of people do not know about because most people know where Singapore is. So in 2001, when I pioneered the church, I really wanted people to have a real experience of Jesus. With about 10 of us started in our living room, in my living room. We started our church with all students. We knew nothing about how to start a church. We just wanted to do Bible study, connect group, hang out, have fun. And so it was out of that we grew from meeting in the little apartment to meeting in a school hall to finally owning our place today. So over the years, I have learned a lot of things about leadership, how to train leaders, and how to help them discover Jesus. But of late, my greatest passion is to help people rediscover the beauty of humanity. I think in the last maybe 15 years of my life, I've been working very, very hard, growing the church and doing a lot of stuff. I realize there's a fine difference between growing the church and growing people. Sometimes we can just grow the church, grow the number, grow the impact, tell people how big is your church, how many churches you have planted. But I realized people could be used for us to achieve our goal, not necessarily God all the time. So we've dived into helping people to discover the beauty of life with Christ. to really know what it means to be loved by God and to love others in return. So that's been really fun. We have been sending our people out to help villages lead up the village because they have no light. So we've sent out teams to with solar panels to light up the villages. We're now helping to build refugee schools in our city because it's very funny. I want to share a story. When we first started reaching out to refugees from Myanmar, a lot of them from Myanmar, they're refugees, right? They don't aim to come to Malaysia. Malaysia is a transition point before they go to America. So they all of them wants to go to America. So we were quite naive. We asked them, so how long have you been here? 3 months, 6 months? They said, no, longer. Yeah. Some of them have been in transition in Malaysia for the third generation. That means their grandparents came, then the dad was born in Malaysia, and then now them. And so we are now raising a lot of money to help build schools for them and provide medical care. It is really an expression of Jesus living on the inside of us that we're doing this. So that's me, Kevin. I'm from Malaysia. I'm so happy to be here meeting everybody.
Man, we are so honored to have you. Thank you. Is it 3 o'clock in the morning there?
Yeah. 3 o'clock in the morning.
You're a good man, and no one has an excuse for not getting on the call. I'm going to make a confession. I think when one of the changes that has happened in my own mind probably over the last 30 years is when I was young, in my mind it was all cities versus suburbs. If you were in the city, you were in the middle of the battle. If you're in the suburbs, you're in the back line. But one of the things that 40 years of life in ministry has taught me is that whenever you're trying to bring life change, you're on the front line. And that it's actually not the city versus the suburb, it's the human that creates the crisis. And that wherever you're dealing with people, you are in the fire. Wherever you're dealing with humans, and you are in the battle. And and that's one of the things I just appreciate so much about pastors and ministry leaders is that they have literally sacrificed their life to help other people live the life that God called them to live. And so we want to create a space here where we understand no matter where you are in the world, and I cannot believe how many countries are on this call. Let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. At the very least, we have Australia, the Emirates, the United Kingdom, Costa Rica, Spain, Canada, Malaysia, and I think I saw someone, and from London, but we have people from all over the world here. And what I can tell you this, if you choose average, you leave the front line. But whenever you decide to live your life and in a way where you're leaning forward and leaning into what God has called you in your life, when you're serving people and trying to reach the world for Christ and you're trying to build the church, you instantly move to the front lines. And it doesn't matter if you're in LA or Des Moines or Atlanta or Beirut, you are on the front line of life whenever you're focused on serving people in Jesus' name. And so we just want to first of all, just say thank you guys so much for what you do across the world. And Eric, I'm going to go back to you. All right. Because I want to dive just a little bit deeper into your conversation today. You gave a long history in a very short form, which, by the way, is very rare for a pastor. Well done. And you covered 9-10 years of being the senior pastor of Bethel in a blink of an eye, and then launching a new church. So I'm going to ask you for 2 insights. One insight is, what's something that's still the same about leadership from your perspective that was true at Bethel and it's true at Studio? Then I'm going to ask you, what is something that is different from your role at Bethel to your role at Studio that you've had to adjust as a leader? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's start with the first one. What's an important leadership principle that still holds true both at Bethel and both at Studio, and help us see how you have come to see that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The thought I have, the first thought, I'm sure there's many, but the first thought would be, I learned that my vision was always faster than where the people were at. And that, and I think as I've gotten older, I've learned to settle in that and be more of a builder than just get frustrated. So I think pastoring a massive church versus a church plant, that's the dynamic that I've seen take place in all the environments I've led. And so I've always felt like I could see. I was talking to a friend last week and who loves history, which I love history, but he loves history to the point that he can't move forward unless he has a reference point behind him. And I said,
Mm.
that's so interesting. I don't need reference points behind me. I need reference points ahead of me. So
Hmm.
that's always been one of my dynamics as a leader. That I'm always talking about something in the future and how I see the future. But one of the things that I've learned is that a lot of people aren't actually where you see, so you have to reverse engineer. And whether that's a human soul issue or that's just the ability to build. So I think I had that dynamic in Reading. What was a little bit different about pastoring Bethel, a very established church, which I believe just turned 70 years old. So it's been around a while. It's established, which is phenomenal. I mean, just when you think about churches lasting multiple generations. I think what was different about what I just said in the Bethel context versus the studio context is that the Bethel context, there was a very clear direction. This is what we're doing. And I saw some thought of the deviation. I didn't feel like with the deviation. I thought this could actually take us into 2.0. And so that dynamic caused me to reverse engineer into, okay, how do I take a pretty significant movement and begin to move 1 inch as much as I can, inch by inch, to move toward a 2.0. So that same principle over here in studio, it's the same thing. I'm farther ahead in the future than where my people are at. But the difference is it's so new and it's so pliable. It's wet clay. And so I'm able to do it quicker and faster because of that. And the people that can't track with it, they're no longer with us, which I think one of the greatest principles in leadership, pastoring a church, is sometimes the greatest gift is when certain people leave. It's just to be straight up. And I think, it's hard when you really care for them and they may be close friends. We've had some of our closest friends move with us across the country and it did not go well. And
Hmm.
that's just the brutality of it. And so I have learned, I try to hold on to them a little too long when it's
Mm.
like, no, the greatest gift is when they step into where they need to be and we can continue. And so
Oh.
anyway, that's a side note, but
No, it's not a side note. It feels like an entire session. And, because there's a bonding and mutual pain, but it's also, I think sometimes, Eric, and I don't know if you ever feel this way. One, it is odd that the people who oftentimes betray you, where it's really painful, are the ones who are closest to you. And if you're at all psychologically healthy and not a narcissist, you wonder, is it me? Like, what's wrong with me? How did I cause this? Is this, what am I doing wrong? And you don't realize that this principle is true for every leader in the world. And that's why it's so important sometimes to have like communities like this, because like, I kind of, the way I look at it, go, I could see people hating me, but how could anyone hate Eric Johnson? you know?
I actually think that. How could you hate me? Like, what is there to hate?
Yeah, you know, and and yet you go, oh, everyone has it. And the reality is that if you don't have anyone that you've ever offended or has ever decided not to follow you any further, you're just not leading. And
True.
that's the part dynamic. So I don't think it's just a side note. I think at one point we need to talk about conflict, how
Yes.
to deal with betrayal, and how to learn from your wounds but not become embittered by them. I think that's a whole space that we need to go in. But I'm going to press back the other way. So what you said to me is the thing you had in common was that both at Bethel and at Studio, you realize you move faster than people,
Hmm.
and but they move slower at Bethel than they did at Studio, right?
Yes.
And so even though you still had to slow down, you didn't have to slow down as much.
Mhm.
And because Bethel was really about incremental change, how to get to 2.0. But if I could press in a little bit, didn't you, when you go to studio, like, because this is the church planting mirage. Like when you start a new church, you think, now I can move really fast because everyone's with me. Everyone's on the same page. Did you get that wake up call? You realize, oh my
Oh,
gosh, I got new people, but I got an old church.
100%. And just to give some context, we had about 1 to 200 people move from Reading, and then and this is conservatively, we had 400 people move from all over the country that we
That
don't
just
even
shows
know.
how compelling you are as a leader.
So 600 people roll in. And so it gives you the like, oh, we are going to start on day one, 2.0. Let's go. And what I learned, what I learned was they liked the version of Eric they knew, but they didn't know the Eric that who would be coming.
Yeah.
And honestly, who he actually was, but just had the freedom to do it. So yes, there was a mirage. It was an oasis. I thought, man, we're gonna crush this thing, and we have 600 people ready to go. And I learned,
Yeah.
I don't know the numbers now, but a lot of those people are not with us.
All right, come on. We're going to press in. We're just going to open the wound. If you had 400 people or 600 people come from all over the country, what percentage of those are still with you now?
This is going to be a guess. I'm going to guess probably 30 to 40%. That might be too nice. It might be less.
So maybe 150.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
really proud of them.
yeah,
Those
and the
are-
reason I want to highlight that is not to highlight that you were ineffective. You were actually effective. And but a lot of times what we don't think is, oh, the effectiveness is keeping everyone. No, the effectiveness is creating a cultural filter where the right people stay.
Yeah.
And the people who really don't belong to the culture you're creating recognize that and leave. Most people don't see people leaving as a sign of leadership, but it actually is a sign of leadership because it means there's greater clarity in your leadership. And but it's still painful, isn't it? You know,
Oh gosh.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
if you could use a metaphor, I think at Bethel you were a caterpillar, and the church tradition was your cocoon. And then when you left and went to studio, you were a butterfly, and everybody wanted to follow the caterpillar.
Yeah.
And they
100%.
said, Eric, you can't fly. You're just delusional. Get back and crawl on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you throw in, multiple generations of familiarity because the
Yeah.
stories about, my grandparents and all that. And I just kind of went left turn. I said, I'm going to do a left turn here. So yeah, so the people that are still with us that were part of the OG group, they've had to go, and I would say most of them, if not all of them, have had to go through kind of a painful journey of watching so many people leave
Yeah.
and their own internal journey. So I don't want to exaggerate, but I would say there's a few remaining that we're walking them through that right now, and they're actually coming out the other side. And so that whole crew that have been with us for 4 years, they want to go to war. Like they're like, all right, we're going. They moved with us, but
Mhm.
so that's really encouraging because now I feel like we have our people, and then we just have people that have joined us since we started. And anyway, so yeah.
So now, for clarity, because I want to make sure everyone listening um, gets this real clear too. I asked you what's something in your leadership that you know now had to change. That's very different between Bethel and studio. Can you identify that, or did you? And I missed it in the narrative.
No, no, they're definitely stuck there. Yeah, that's a really good. Yeah, okay. I would say what I had at Bethel is you had people that could execute vision. Like an idea would come up, it would get executed.
Mm,
I just didn't realize that's not normal to have those people around. So what I had to learn was, yeah, so I think moving and starting something from the ground up. So now, and I've learned to trust my wife more, and there's another staff member that's very similar. They always tell me, can you not stop dreaming and imagining a future, but can you let us know when you want to do that? Because we're not ready for the backlash of it or the result of it. And so I've had to learn to find my cadence with the team that can actually the ones that are implementing and
Mm-hmm.
can discern because I see here and here, the in between, they're really good at. At Bethel, it was just built into the culture. So here I've had to learn to develop a skill set and timing of what to share and to build a team of people that can actually do that. So I don't know if that the biggest that's been a massive change and it's been very frustrating, but I've now found a piece in the last probably year and a half, like, oh, I need to build that execution piece needs to be built, and we're getting that as we speak.
Well, that's such a great insight. It was not what I expected, and I love that. I love when it's an unexpected insight, because what you're really saying is one of Bethel's strengths was implementation, and so they had implementers throughout the whole organization, and that was the assumption from you. It was I got a vision. It'll get implemented because that's how it worked at Bethel. It's interesting because with most church planters who come from a dynamically fast growing church, their illusion is usually that they created more momentum than they did. Usually they think that they were the conduits of growth, but they were not. They were managing growth rather than creating growth.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times the awakening moment is, oh, growth doesn't just happen, there's something I have to do for growth to begin to happen here.
Yeah.
Because you had 600 people in the beginning, you actually had like instantaneous growth in that sense.
Yeah.
But you didn't have any infrastructure.
No infrastructure.
and,
Great
and
ideas, but no infrastructure. Yeah.
that's a really great insight.
Yeah, I think psychologically it's been interesting too, because like I said, I'm approaching 50, so I'm becoming a little bit more aware of time left.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking to myself, how long is it going to take to am I going to be 55, 60, 65 before I see some of the results of this? And so I've had to adjust my thinking because I'm not 20 thinking I've got so much time. So that's been an interesting psychological adjustment for me and just accepting it and saying, no, I'm obviously gonna give it my all and we're gonna continue to go. I believe we're gonna see those things, but I thought it would be quicker. And that part that I have had to take time to build and still building is that infrastructure, systems and processes and the people to implement and execute.
No, that's really good. And it's exciting from multiple levels because you're one of those few people who have stood in both extreme spots. The senior pastor of a really significant church movement, and then starting from scratch. And although even starting from scratch is almost a misnomer, right? But you're starting in a new place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that principle in the Bible that people talk about. Well, I don't know if people talk about it, but it's Jacob and Esau, or Esau and Jacob, where Esau always comes first, but Jacob's the one that God uses. And early on in my life, that principle is like, Erwin, the people you have in the first year, they're not going to stay with you. They're Esau. And you just have to keep driving forward until Jacob comes. And so I think a lot of times people, one, they become attached to Esau. And so they become a part of the wrong legacy rather than building the thing God. They give up their vision to keep the people they have,
Yeah.
which could have been a temptation, right, for you going, if I just redo Bethel, these 600 people are going to love me.
Oh, I guarantee you, this is without a doubt. If I would have copy and pasted everything, it it would be a pretty significantly, much more significantly sized church. There's no question.
Yeah. And so
And
that's the temptation of Esau is, do you want to create like a legacy from the wrong story?
yeah, there's an
And
old Shesh Table episode. I think it's in the first season. It's the one I forget. I think his name is Michael. I can't pronounce the last name.
Aaron
And
will know.
he inherited a restaurant from his dad and his uncle. And the famous dish on the menu that made this restaurant Michelin star was the salmon sorrel. And
Mm.
it's his famous dish. So he inherited this restaurant from his uncle and his dad, and he was doing the restaurant, but he was losing himself. He wasn't creating like he wanted to create. So he made this incredibly hard decision. He took that dish that made this restaurant what it is, took it off the menu, and the entire clientele just lost their minds over it. But he was convinced. So I'm watching this was years ago. I'm watching this, and he said this statement. I have it written down in my notes somewhere. I had to break free from the shackles of tradition to find out who I am.
Mm.
So it tells the story. So he basically had to reinvent himself, his restaurant, from really hard years. So I don't know how many years later, he basically creates back up to Michelin star level. But then he does something that I thought was really cool. He said, "Now I want to bring the salmon sorrel back on the menu." So he brings it back on the menu with a little bit of his own flavor. So that episode hit me many years ago. And so, because I come from a strong tradition, strong, so much beauty, so much strength, but I've intentionally said, you know what, I love it, but I need some time to figure out what's the menu, like
Yeah.
what's coming from my wife and I. And what's interesting, I've already met with my team in the last 6, 8 months. I said, guys, they know the story. I said, I feel like it's time to start looking at the salmon sorrel and bring it back on the menu. Because I think we have a much better idea of who we are now. Now the salmon sorrel will be added versus it being our identity. So anyway, that's been the journey in the process.
Mm. I think I would change that statement just a little bit from I had to break free from the shackles of tradition. I think there are heavier shackles for him and for many leaders that you have to break free from the shackles of success. And because it wasn't the tradition he had to really break free from. He had to let go of that Michelin star. He
Yeah,
had to let go of the success that defined them, and that success held them captive to the past.
that's good.
And having been here in LA for 35 years, I can tell you that we've had moments of extraordinary success, and they became shackles that weighted us from stepping into a future that was waiting for us. And it's difficult because you had you had the shackles of Bethel and all of its success, and you couldn't say it doesn't work. You kind of just had to say it doesn't work for me, you know,
Yeah.
and yeah, and it doesn't work for the vision that God has given me. And yeah, and then, but when you bring it back on the menu, it's no longer the centerpiece. It's now integrated into a different culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of that. So I do think that is important because even if you're not pastoring a church, even if you're just living life and you love Jesus, we all have the shackles of tradition and the shackles of success and the shackles of failure that hold us back from stepping forward in our lives. And the shackles of tradition can oftentimes just be the expectations of your family and on your parents, the people that are your significant inner circle. And if you leave what they expect for your life, it can be incredibly painful. It can be the shackles of your own success. It's amazing. Like two of the greatest artists I know, they actually were both engineers before they became artists. And they were successful engineers and then shifted careers. Can you imagine
Yeah.
the fear? I think you couldn't do it without some fear, right? And the overwhelming burden if even other people's expectation on your life are what are you doing? You're jeopardizing our security. You're jeopardizing our financial stability. You're jeopardizing, you've built a great career. This is who you are. And so I think those shackles of success can be so weighty on a person's life, but also the shackles of failure, where you've tried something in the past, and I think you've probably done this even at studio, where have you tried something where it failed, but you realized later it wasn't the idea that failed, it was the timing?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for everyone else, it's the failure is proof the idea is wrong.
Yeah. Hmm.
But really like intuitive entrepreneur leaders are able to identify when the problem isn't the idea, it's the timing. The environment isn't right. The people aren't ready. You were not ready. You had the idea, but you did not have the skill set to implement that idea.
Yeah, you just described year one and year four.
All right, tell us, unwrap that.
Yeah, no, like year one, man, just this is what's happening. Vision, this is what we're doing, this is what we're, building, this is how I envision it. And it just kept, it didn't fall flat, it just didn't get traction. And then we went through the last few years of that certain people needed to leave. I needed to get clearer, less abstract, and get more clearer. And then in year four, the end of 2024, so last year was a really difficult year in the context of people leaving and all the dynamic. It felt like the last wave of people left. When we came into 2025, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden everything clicked and this has been our best year. Like this has been a very good year for us personally and for our community. And I remember thinking I shared all this in year one. It just was the wrong timing. It just wasn't. There was no the people the right dynamics weren't at play yet, and now they are. So now when we're doing things, it's like we're taking strides versus barely moving. So
Mm.
that's year one, year four for us because of what you just said.
All right. Hey, let's take a moment. Aaron, can you redirect us for a few moments before we dive into the next section?
Yeah. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Hey, Aaron, good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Okay, so we have a couple of questions in the chat, but guys, on Zoom, there's those three dots. You guys can press it and raise your hand, and we'll call on you guys, and we can ask questions for a little section of time. But one of the questions in the chat, Eric, was, what was an example of backlash? Was it asking too much of people too fast?
Backlash. When did I say backlash? Was
Talked
it?
about you talked about backlash from the team when you're trying to, like, one of the differences between like maybe working at Bethel was that you had a great team of implementers, of executors.
Yes, yes.
Like when you were talking about maybe some of like the things you're trying to bring people into in this new season, that was like you would get backlash from different people who come with you.
Yeah, I think most of the backlash had to do with people that loved the result of a vision but weren't willing to build it. And so it gravitated people towards, they were frustrated that the vision wasn't happening because it hadn't been built yet. And I was used to sharing vision and someone would build. And here I am sharing vision, but it's not being built. And so the backlash would people's frustrated expectations, like, I thought you said we were going to do this, this, and this. And I'm saying we are, but it's going to take some time. So I think the backlash would just really increase frustration. And then it started getting aimed at me and my wife, but more me so, because I'm the one that's always dreaming. And
Mhm.
so the backlash, but it felt personal. And I think that's where it just hurts. It just felt personal. It felt methodical. It felt like they're taking a scalpel and just slowly cutting away. And it felt so personal. So the backlash was, but once I got past the emotional pain of it, I realized, oh, these people aren't builders. They just want to enjoy Disneyland, but don't want to build it. And so the backlash was that whole dichotomy right there. So I started confronting people and saying, "You're complaining that we're not doing X. What have you done about X?" And the answer was nothing. And I realized, oh, these people have no weight, no skin in the game. So I had to retranslate this what felt personal. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but that was the backlash.
Mhm.
Oh, that makes sense. No, I think that's really unique. Was it when you were talking about, is it okay if I press in on this question? Because one of the things that I find really interesting, like, was it just because I look at you guys, like Bethel behind the scenes has helped so many people, right? Your team not only helped what you guys built back in that era, but I don't know if people know this, but your team was always helping everybody. Like you guys had such open doors. I know that ended up on random group chats with guys on your tech teams or like getting insights and dropping links. And you guys had such great implementers, but that took time. Like I would love even at someday, Dad and Eric, just like if you could walk us through the eras of Bethel, like even just like who built the structures of implementation? You know, like what era was that? Because I think in different leaders' reign, you have different eras of like structure or implementation or different, you know, like that even just your music world, like was it ever frustrating to have a bad worship Sunday? Or, you know, like, well, in studio, like I'm sure you had them, like, you know, like I would love to know
Yeah.
how do you manage those frustrations? How do you manage those moments in those times, you know?
Yeah.
We have a question from Kevin. Hey Kevin, how you doing? Oh, there you go.
Guys, how's it going? Just want to say first and foremost, thank you guys for just putting this together because just what you guys have been saying, my mind is just being blown away and blown away and blown away and blown away.
Mm.
I created this group called the Renaissance Room.
Mhm.
It's over here in like Pomona, about 45 minutes away from LA. And everything that you guys are speaking of, I'm currently going through, and I'm always asking myself, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, am I like the bad person? Because, like you said, there's always someone trying to pinpoint something that's wrong with your organization. And I don't have like a church background or anything like that. I just recommitted my life to God last year, and He just told me to make like an online group chat on Instagram to hold people accountable. And it kind of grew to this whole thing. And now we do Bible studies every Monday night, and we bring different pastors, different guest speakers, different teachers to teach the guys. And I've learned to like I could create the space. You know what I'm saying? I'm learning how to create the culture. I don't think that I'm ready to teach and to preach the gospel just yet. I'm studying, I'm learning, I'm growing with the Lord in my intimacy and things like that. It hurts because I feel like I get attacked sometimes. Like my life is under a microscope and everyone's looking for that one little, oh, look, he did those 99 things right, but that one thing right there, that's why he's a bad person, you know? And so I've learned to like guard my heart and be protective and, like filter people out. And even then, I still see people like just trying to, attack a little bit. Um, and I mean, I don't know, it just what you guys are saying just really resonates with me. I just wonder if you have some advice for me so that way I can move forward, you know?
Mm. Boy, Aaron, you could actually really speak to this
Oh,
too.
I mean this with like as the utmost compliment. I never heard about you, Kevin Gonzalez. So I'm a stranger in the world that thinks nothing bad about you. And you're on this call, and so I like you more now than I did 5 minutes ago. But I think like, but I mean that in this, like, I think it's good and helpful to like step outside. Yeah, you ever seen the movie Unbreakable with Bruce Willis? There's like, this is aging me because now I'm 37, but there's just like a scene at the end where he's like discovering something in his own story arc where he just like, you know, stretches his hands out and he's in the middle of like a train station. He's just experiencing being around other people. I think sometimes we talk about this, like sometimes we just put ourselves in our own fishbowl and it's like good for like new people poke holes in the reality that there's new people out there that don't know you that have no feeling towards you and you can start fresh and by being kind. Like I was having a really bad day on Saturday, like just a weird day, not a bad day, just a weird day. We had like a weird stalker situation, woman showing up at our house. And I told my dad, I was like, I was cruising through the grocery store and a grocery store in LA is so chaotic because there's just people everywhere and on top of people. And I asked this like elderly woman to just, hey, excuse me, I didn't mean to be rude. I have to like go through you and your family to get to the next aisle. And she looked at me and goes, you were the first nice person I've met in LA. And I laughed and said, if I'm the nicest person you met in LA, you're gonna have a rough trip. But it was like encouraging to me. It was like, this person doesn't know me. This person just said something so nice, and I was able to be so nice back. And I think it's just sometimes a good reminder to know, like, or just to go, you know, there's 7 billion people out there, 8 billion people out there who don't know me, and there's a lot of new chances for new opportunities and new people and new reputations. That's the way I'd break it down. But Dad, what do you think about?
No, I think that's exactly right. That's the conversation we had. Whenever I have someone who just decides that I'm the devil, and I just remind myself there's still like almost 8 billion people that don't know me that I get to try all over again and have a great relationship and build into their life and see the world get better. And I just try to remind myself that when I feel overwhelmed by negativity or overwhelmed by the heaviness of life, I just step outside of it and go, life is way bigger than this problem. And it just allows me to breathe more deeply. And that's what I want to encourage you, bro. You're new in your faith. I'm sorry you're getting attacked. but I'm kind of excited that you're doing something worth attacking. And, and so don't reorganize your life to not be attacked. But if someone attacks you, be humble and look at yourself and go, is there something I need to fix? Is there any truth to that? Is there a way I need to adjust? And then once you've done that, you can move on, because attackers don't want you to grow. They want you to disappear. And when you can take their negative input and become a better person, they've actually added to your value, which will drive them insane. And so just keep growing and keep trying new things, and don't worry about the haters. All right, Aaron, do we have some other questions?
Yes, we have five. Joe Vacante.
My question is for Eric Johnson. Thank you so much for sharing. Eric, what mindsets or scriptures helped pull you forward into the future during all the tough years of changes and pain you just described?
It's a great question. Probably one of my favorite passages in the Bible is Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. For me, it just seems to summarize the whole story that God's creating from beginning to eternity or the end, and whatever your eschatology is. But those 10 verses just summarize. And so I find myself going there a lot and just reminding myself, this is where it's at right here. And then the other one that keeps me dreaming or keeps me longing is Ecclesiastes 3, where 3:11, which says he has placed eternity in their hearts. So Ephesians 2 and that passage were the two passages that I just kind of ate a lot. Those were my filet mignons. Those were my nutrition that kind of gets me through some of those dark moments.
It's so good.
Thanks.
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good, good.
Good.
What's up?
Eric, my question is for you. So in those dark moments when you faced the resistance and you were focused on the vision that you had and you were out in front of where you wanted to be, how many times or how did you process the negativity and wonder whether your vision was wrong or if it only strengthened your vision to go faster or in a different way? Or I'm trying to parse how you were reconciling those two tensions of knowing where you wanted to go and the resistance you were feeling. Did any of that resistance change your vision?
Yeah, it's a really good question. To be blunt, I wanted to quit a million times. I mean, that thought crossed my mind. I'm not even exaggerating. There were multiple, I mean, there were months of just, screw this, I'm done. This is just constantly battling that. I would call Erwin. I've got like two or three friends that I call just to kind of remind myself. And so the bluntness of it was very difficult. I wanted to quit. My wife could see it. And she was in the same boat at times. The key was we both didn't feel the same way at the same time.
That's
One of
good.
us needed to not be in that posture. So yeah, so I think that's a real thing. It didn't change my vision. I think my vision's gotten clearer. So I actually think I've been able to take all of this negative energy and help it to refine my vision.
Mm,
Because I convinced myself, not for everyone, but I convinced myself, if people could just understand what this vision is, then they will change where they're going and they'll go with us, if that makes sense. So
mm,
I tried, that was my way of taking all this negative energy or backlash or resistance. Okay, I need to get clearer. I need to get more dialed. I need to build this out more. And I did. And I'm still doing that. That's why I think this year is our best year because I spent so many hours, days, weeks of just really refining the language, really determining our vernacular, the story. And so when I started January 1st, I knew exactly what the next 6 months Sundays were going to be. I have never had that experience in my life. I'm much more a week by week guy. That's kind of how I roll. But for some reason, I got a 6 month plan at the beginning of this year. Then when I got into May and June, I got a really clear plan of the rest of this year. So that was new territory for me, but I think it's because of what I did building up to that. It just kind of became clearer. So I think to answer your question, taking all that negative, it didn't change my vision. It made it clearer and I got more emboldened in it. And I think that's how it didn't take me out, if I can be really honest with you. It didn't take me out. And then the other thing really quickly is have two or three people in your life that they can pull you back up. They can pull you out and they can call you out like, hey, yeah, you're off here. You need to make the adjustment. And so I mentioned Erwin. I've got two other guys that I call weekly. And so I think you need to have people outside of your environment that you can lean on, and that's very helpful. I don't know how I would have gotten through those without those few people.
Awesome. Glad you made it through.
Hey Jordan, how you doing, man?
Good. How's it going?
Good, good.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Eric, maybe Erwin as well, just depending on who wants to jump in. But so Eric, so much of your story has resonated for sure. So just thanks for sharing and being honest about all that. You touched on it a little bit, but would love to hear some thoughts on leading the people that stay through the seasons where people are leaving. So kind of pastoring your team through that and stuff, because we've definitely been through seasons where it feels like the shedding of people is kind of all at once. Like you kind of talked about, you had at the end of last year. I feel like we had something similar here recently. And I know it's pretty discouraging, obviously, for some of the people that stay. So kind of leading people through that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It definitely pulled on the pastoral side, which I obviously am a pastor. I can do that. It's not my strength. It's not something I wake up thinking, man, I want to pastor a bunch of people. So it pulled on that a lot more in that season. And so I had to make sure I emotionally and mentally was ready to do that. And so the conversations were a lot like this. How are you doing? How did this impact you? And some of them would be close friends of friends. And I say, hey, how are you doing since so and so? And I just let them talk and just let them process. And then I would say, is there anything you need from me? And surprisingly, not a lot of people said, yeah, I need this from you. They said, no, I just needed you to hear where I'm at. And so I think it's honestly probably a majority of them would just kind of lean into that pastoral vein, that pastoral strength, and just let them talk. Now it also impacted our staff. So it impacted our people, but then you have our staff. So we sometimes will dedicate our staff meetings are 2 hours a week, and we would dedicate at least an hour of it to just talk as a team, at least during some of those times, just for them to talk. And the lots of tears, just it's a lot. It's just a lot. And so I empathize with you. And so I think creating space for conversations, and my MO is to turn it back to the future. I wouldn't do that. I just let it sit. Because I think if I turned it to the future, then I would miss the moment of people getting kind of healed in the conversation and kind of processing way through it. So I just turned that vision off for those moments and just let people talk. So that if you could do that, just create spaces for that. People are really resilient, and they will, if they really believe in the vision and who you are, they'll walk through all of that. They will. And so just creating space for those people. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question off the back end of that? When you took those moments to just sit and talk, was there like not to make everything systemized, but like was there a format? Would you just go like, hey, I just want to like give like if you have questions or you want to share, like how did you run that meeting?
Yeah, it would always start off with, hey, how is everyone doing? I mean, that's kind of how is everyone? And it's like the elephants in the room. So everyone knows what you're referring to. Hey, how is everyone? It's like, especially if it was, you just got news that so and so and so and so and so. So we always ask, how is everyone doing? And what's interesting, the ones that talk the most are always the first one to say something, which I think is great. I have no problem with that. But I also want to know the people that rarely talk, they don't talk. So we would let it go around the table. So I think from an awareness of the leader, I would ask, hey, how are you doing? I would, there's like two or three staff members that are more quieter. And when there's conflict or tension, they almost want to disappear. But I wouldn't let them. So I just try to pastor them and say, hey, how are you doing? And there was always a long pause. And I just let it sit. And I think, if there's silent, let the silence sit. Just let it sit. And it would feel like a grueling minute, but most likely it's probably 10 seconds. And then they start opening up. And so I think we try to make sure everybody had a voice. There are several occasions where we'd have one-on-one conversations with staff members or one-on-one conversations with people. And then at the end, we would pray together. We definitely, prayer is the big part of what we try to do. And then we would pray for the people that left. We would pray for them, that God bless them. We pray that they find a place that's home for them. So we always tried to make sure we were moving towards kindness, towards grace, but we didn't jump there instantly. We wanted to walk through frustrations, anger, sadness, all those emotions, but we always wanted to make sure we ended up in hey, let's be kinder, let's be more gracious, let's be more compassionate. So that was not a system, but that's kind of the journey we would take people through.
Appreciate that. Josh, how you doing, man?
Man, fantastic. It's great to meet you, Eric. Look forward to getting to know you better. I know you met my dad and stuff, but
By the way, guys, Joshua Kraft is going to be one of our contributors this year. So we're excited to have him as one of our voices.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to learn from everybody. I have a lot to learn. I feel like I'm 38, so I'm pretty far behind you, and I'm probably way more green than you were. So just pray for me and everyone around me that has to deal with me. No, I think the question that I have, which is like such a powerful thing that you said, that I don't know what your frequencies are, but like I think one of the things that, like, as a Maven, I think that what you said about timing, I think, was so significant. Like, I can't remember how you said it specifically, but it could be the right thing but the wrong time. And I think at the place you're at in your leadership and your life, what do you feel like some of those greatest, maybe, top one, two, three things that you've really learned about timing, in terms of giving people that vision of the future? Because like you're saying, I mean, I totally resonate with what you're saying, just as it relates to, okay, I see this. How long is that going to take? Thinking that it should take 1 month when it's probably going to take like 5 years. So what do you feel like you've really learned about timing in terms of helping people make the trip?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, my main core frequency is Maven.
Yeah,
So,
me too.
yeah.
So, got it.
Yeah, the timing, that's a really good question. There's a passage in the Old Testament, a story in the Old Testament. I forget the exact name, but God is pretty upset with somebody and he wants to do something to them. But he said this line, he said, "But I won't do it because of your father David." Well, the reality, this wasn't David's son. This was someone in the lineage of David that was 400 years later. So that to me, when I think about time and vision and building, I also think legacy and momentum somehow can affect a future generation. And so there's something there. So what that tells me is that I'm going to give my life to this, but I'm also doing this for a generation I'll never see. And so that helps me. It doesn't slow me down. It actually inspires me to do it even more quality. And then the timing, the other aspect of building, I think, is making sure the foundation can sustain what you're going to build that everybody sees.
Mm.
So it's a lot of the intangibles. And sometimes I think we don't like building foundations in our life because it's not sexy. It's a slab of concrete. But if you don't have something strong enough, reinforced enough, it will not be able to hold and sustain what you build upward. So I think that helps me as a leader when it comes to timing, going, okay, if I were to build this now, it would be amazing. It'll be beautiful, but it may not last. I want it to last. Like, I want what we built actually goes beyond my time into another generation. And if that means most of our time and energy is building the infrastructure, the foundation, if that's what it takes, then I want to do that. And so those are the two ideas I pulled from. 400 years later, David's David blessing protected a people. So there's something about that that resonates with me. And then recognizing maybe my role is this. Now I secretly hope it's not, because I want to see it all. And so, but does that make sense? Those are kind of the two things that I pull in to timing as a leader in building.
You know, Eric, just to add to the conversation, if you want to look in a different domain to understand the power of timing, you know, Aaron and I, you know, we have a fashion company called Ghost Artifacts, and you know, one of the things you know over the years is that you don't want to put out your winter clothes in the summer, and if you want to sell nothing, put out your summer stuff in the winter, and that you have to match the timing with the needs of the people as well.
Yeah,
So it's not just the timing of your idea, your vision,
it's good.
but if your vision isn't actually solving a human problem, one that will never have great timing, but you can actually be solving the wrong human problem in that
Yeah.
moment, and I think that's significant. In Unstoppable, I actually talk about this concept about starting with the why, which ended up becoming a pretty giant concept with Simon Sinek. But one of the things there, Eric, is like so many times the timing is wrong because we move toward execution. Because when you're a visionary, you're already there.
Yeah.
To go to step one is like going to the past, and it's a very painful thing. Like, why do I have to start at the beginning? I'm already at the end of this thing. And so you move right to the what we're going to do or how we're going to do it, and we don't realize that we don't have the right season yet because we haven't dealt with the why. And the why deals with human need, human longing, and human essence. And a huge part of great visionary leadership is creating the right timing by nurturing that timing. It doesn't happen by accident. Great leaders don't just go, now I have my perfect moment. Great leaders go, these are the things I need to do to create the environment that becomes the perfect moment.
That's good.
We have a couple of questions in the chat that are like different topics, but I think sort of once we get through Leo and Kevin, I'll jump over to those. Some great questions. And guys, if I'm getting some like private DMs from you guys in the chat, if you guys have topic ideas or question ideas that you want, we're doing a longer format for this like very reason, so that we can kind of like jump around and get input on multiple different perspectives of this situation or anything. Leo, how are you?
Doing great. It's amazing to be in these days here and seeing all of this ministry in arena rise up. In your experience, Eric, it's not about in the why question, it's a how question. Have you applied any kind of AI in the structure of this new rise of church in the way of organizing? I had in the past bad examples of applying like a planning center or other service and structure that you try to turn serving easy, but sometimes you just grow weak people doing that. Do you see any role for AI in this new generation church for now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do use ChatGPT for a variety of things. I've not used it for a structural or for systems and processes necessarily. Now, but I'm also not the one that's primarily focused on building systems and structures and processes. My staff does most of that. So I would have to ask them, to be honest with you, on that. Some of the main systems that we use Planning Center, Church Center, and then we use Overflow for our financial giving platform. We just moved from PushPay over to Overflow, and we really like it. It's a great platform. It's working really well. We've had it for about 2 or 3 months, and I'm really happy with it. But as far as AI, I not specifically in that area. I've used it in other areas, but not specifically in the area that you're mentioning. Yeah, so that's my response.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, guys? I am doing well. Hey, thank you for doing the session today, Eric. Can you share a little bit about uh, the way that you transitioned from Reading to doing ministry in Bible Belt to starting a church and sort of that Southern Bible Belt culture? Some of the challenges you guys faced early on and how you navigated those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll be honest with you, I was a bit naive in regards to this region where I live. I was a bit naive in how it's not just this is my perspective, of course. It's not just the church culture, it's actually the culture. And that was the part I just was not fully aware of. And I know nor I could be fully aware of. And maybe I'll never will be. But what I do find interesting is Greenville is a little bit of an anomaly in the region we're in. It's an anomaly because it's fast growing, tons of people moving in from all over. And when I travel around the area, I don't think I would have moved if I did move to Greenville. So we did a couple of things on our trip. There were a couple of cities that we were interested in. One of them was Charleston, which if you've been to Charleston, it's a charming city. It's
Oh,
amazing.
yeah.
We love going there for vacations and weekends, but I could never live there because it's a city that's preserving culture and preserving the past. And I think I would probably die there if I were trying to build something there. And then we went to Raleigh up in North Carolina, went to Charlotte, but then Greenville, what Greenville drew my attention to Greenville, it was a city that is wanting to move into the future as a city. And that was the frequency that really lined up with me. So transition to the South, what I was a little bit naive on was Bob Jones University. If you're not familiar with that, Bob Jones is one of the most fundamental Baptist universities. Um, from my understanding, it's significant and it's 10 minutes from my house. I wasn't aware of the fundamental Baptist, how much it's not just within the church world, but it's within the whole culture. So you have a guy like me coming from California who has my all my futuristic thinking coming in and trying to move the needle dramatically. Now, I would say we have quite a few Bob Jones graduates, which is really interesting to me. And I think it's because they ran down that road for a long time and it just didn't fit them. And so we fit them really well. And I think we fit a lot of people that are not born and raised in the area, but they live there now. And I think we also fit a lot of entrepreneurs, creatives, business CEOs, anybody that is wanting to create and generate action, economies or creativity. Studio is a home for them. And so I kind of answered your question, but the context, I've learned a lot and it's a different world. I mean, it's a very different world. I have some very different theologies, and I've ran into that. But there is a fast growing number of people that don't line up with that thinking, and that's who I'm recognizing who studio's for. And so I have to slow down. So when we talk about the other conversation of vision, I have to slow it down and invite people into it instead of just being so far ahead of them. So that's changed my teaching style, how I communicate, what I prepare, how I lay it out. It's much more invitational instead of just shock and awe. So that's changed since I've come here for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Kevin. Hey, Mike.
Hey guys,
Hey.
thanks so
I
much for this.
can I add a new thing? Hey, Mike, will you introduce
Yeah,
yourself? Like, let us know where you're from. Like,
sure.
can we just get everybody to introduce, give us like maybe where you're from, what you're doing, some background.
Yeah, my name's Mike. I live in Northern Virginia, so just outside the DC area, and serve as an executive pastor on staff at a church here. So that's me. And questions kind of open, regarding, I guess, visionary leadership, leading teams, obviously leading volunteers. And I was curious, like, if you have any insights, principles, anything in regards to like how do we lead people to surrender preference for the sake of purpose? So like valuing we over me, right? Like what makes you unique is what makes you powerful. But sometimes running into, I call it the IMA effect, where people sometimes use their like, well, I'm a introvert, or like, well, I'm a Enneagram 4. Well, I'm a Maven. Like, how do we keep it from those being like tools that we can use versus like becoming like excuses? I guess so. Surrendering like preferences that sometimes people push back on, and trying to create that invitation to like again for the purpose and for the sake of the mission instead of our preferences. I don't know.
Were you asking anyone of us specifically?
Yeah. Just open question, I guess.
Eric, I'm assuming he's asking you.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer this question.
I was just making sure I didn't hear a name, so I was
I'll
just
jump in after you, but we have you today, and I'm going to milk you all the way because I love your insights.
okay, perfect. Um, yeah, that when Erwin asked me, hey, what do you think are some of the great challenges of being a pastor today? And one of them is around this idea of a faith that is getting more solo, more isolated, more siloed, and more private. And so you can kind of see the trajectory of Christianity is kind of moving in that direction. And so it's very difficult. We are finding it difficult to get people out of that. Now, how much of it is a millennial thing? How much of it is a Gen Z, Gen Alpha? I mean, there are some interesting conversations around that I think would be interesting to have at some point. But I would just echo that, yeah, that is the dynamic that is in my 30 years. 30 years ago, that wasn't as strong of a dynamic. We weren't talking about how difficult it is for people to get out of their own private little spiritual journeys. That was not a conversation. It was so communal, at least contrasting today to then. It was so communal. You didn't do life alone. You did life together. You know, when you read scripture about our Father, it was like it was our God. It was like we are running together. It was we, not me. Fast forward to today, it's I, it's myself, and you know what I mean. So that is a real dynamic. That's something that I have been honestly deeply frustrated with because I cannot find the story of the gospel of moving in that direction. I find it doing the exact opposite.
Of
And
what
so
direction, Eric? What do you mean?
what I mean is, I don't find the story of the gospel coming down to just a relationship with just me and God.
Mm-hmm.
I see it moving towards it's actually touching all of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And part of our faith, I don't think we fully experience or express until we think beyond ourselves. Actually, I think a lot of it, to be frank with you. And so that dynamic. So what I find myself doing is going back to the life of Jesus and teaching on it and unpacking it. And it didn't get siloed. It became all about humanity. So actually teaching the people and then modeling it. But this one, I mean, I would be keen on Erwin's thought on this specific one. I was talking with some of my leaders last week. I said, I was raised around the leadership principle, you lead by example. You know, you lead by example, people observe it and they follow you. What I'm noticing, that dynamic, at least for me, it's not working anymore. And I think I know why. It's like you lead by example and everyone's like, thank you. They don't follow. And I think it's because, oh, you're serving me versus you're invited. And so that dynamic, I'm kind of I was telling my leaders last week, I said, yeah, leading by example is not working because Candace and I are still cleaning toilets, setting up. We have a team of people, so it's not just my wife and I. We're still grunt working, and I don't mind it. Our staff, every Thursday, we go to our building and we clean, mop, and sweep and set up chairs. And I kind of want to keep it that way for a long term because I think I like the principle of it. But leading by example of not having the same effect it did 20 years ago. And so,
You're right, Eric.
go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, one of the interesting things that, because I'm older than all of you by like almost double, that when I was younger, when someone invested in your life, you saw that as their like sacrifice and contribution into you. And now it's seen as an expectation of that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so early on, like I thought, oh, if I'm super generous, people will become super generous. But actually, they did not become super generous, they became super dependent. And so you do have to figure that out, mitigate that, and ask the question, how do you transfer values, not create imitation of action? Because when people imitate action, once the scenario changes, they don't know how to transfer the principle. But if you're able to transfer values, then they apply it into every arena in their life. And it really makes a difference. And, I had, to me, a very similar experience. Like one of our team members, David Arcos, and I were in Abu Dhabi. And I think for probably my first 20 years, I bought every meal for every single person I ever ate with. Point blank. I never let anyone else buy a meal. And I kept thinking in many ways that would create generosity. But all the sociological studies show that it actually, the person who buys or sacrifices, the person who bonds, the person who receives never bonds to you. They actually never feel an emotional, relational connection. And so when we were in Abu Dhabi, we were having dinner. He took me to this like Michelin star restaurant. It was pretty amazing. And it was over. He's like, he's paying the bill. And I'm like, no, I got this. And he goes, no, you have to let me pay. Like, please let me buy you dinner. You always buy dinner. And I realized that moment, one, I thought, what a great human being, right? And everything inside of me didn't want to let him buy the meal, but I realized that in some sense, I don't allow him to be the awesome person he is if I don't let him pay. And so that it was, I think I actually was more like uncomfortable through it. And sometimes what you have to learn how to do is learn how to receive and not just to give, because you have to let other people become the contributors or the givers on the journey. So I think there's a dynamic there sociologically we need to learn as leaders along the way, not expecting people to do things for us, but also not doing things for people thinking it will create the kind of leadership bond that you expect. It doesn't work out that way. But I did want to go just for a minute. Was it Mike who asked a question about, like, what you're saying, I am people, like I am an 8 on Enneagram, or I am, this or that. I think there's a dynamic here that needs to be explored just a little bit, because it'd be better to use like jujitsu than boxing. Like if someone says, I am an 8, it feels like your natural inclination is to go, it doesn't matter what you are, stop caring about your preference and just, can do what's needed. And rather than that, like lean into it and go, that's great. That means that you can actually step up more and do this. It's like whether it's Enneagram, your personality, whether you're introverted, extroverted, that doesn't define what you can do. It defines how you will do it.
Wow.
And so you want to make sure you distinguish between character and style, character and personality, like character and and attributes. Because even the Bible says, hey, there's a hand, there's a foot, you're a head, you're a neck. Like, so one of the first personality assessments in history is in the Bible. And it allows people to identify themselves from a very unique posture, but you're only supposed to identify yourself to know how you fit into the whole, not so that you can just stand separate and apart. And that's a part of leadership, is going, I'm so glad you know your uniqueness. Now let's work at figuring out how to move that uniqueness into complement with the community.
Good.
Hey, Tim, can I unmute you for a second?
Yeah, what's up?
Oh no, I thought what you said in the chat was interesting.
About this point?
Yeah. Can you just bring us back to that?
By the way, before you do that, can you give everybody a little background who you are, because you're one of our main contributors for this year?
Oh yeah, my name's Tim Moore, and I'm just grateful to be on here. And my little bit of my story, I guess. I planted a church back when I was in my mid-20s. Had never had any large church, or I should say, never had any lead pastor role, never had any of that. Just grew up in a really small church environment most of my life, but had a passion to break out of that and reach the lost. And so that's kind of what started that, launched the church, and been doing it for 22 and a half years, and gone through so many different versions of the story and iteration and growth. And so I too, like Eric, am approaching the big 5-0. I probably have a couple thoughts to leave with people, but not too much. I don't know if you need any more.
Aaron, did you have some of the questions you wanted him to highlight?
Well, he asked a question Tim asked a question in the chat. What do you think culturally shifted people away from being inspired to action from lead by example? What do you think some of that was, Eric, Tim?
Boy, that's a great question. I want to say it, and I don't want to come across as mean or ungrateful, because it's not. I think it's more observation. I do think when there was the dramatic elevation around emotional health, there's something in that space where, when I was a youth pastor, it was around that era. So this was in my 20s, maybe 30s. It felt like we moved to participation trophy culture. And we kind of got away from, you like that, we got away from winners to, hey, everyone just gets a blue ribbon. It kind of flattened all that. And then the next iteration of that moved into a high emphasis on how you're doing emotionally. And so emotions kind of became king. Now, the reason why I think that became a topic, because the previous generation never dealt with it. So it's just kind of, and I can look at I talk about my emotional health. It's very different than conversations my parents are having. They look at me and smile and like, okay, but there's no connection there. And so I do think the elevation of emotional health made us more focused on self. So I think there's a part of emotional health that has to be talked about and developed. But I think the shadow side of it is it made us way more aware of how I'm doing, what I'm in the mood for or not in the mood for. And it just kind of shifted all of our priorities. And so the idea of sacrificing, the idea of serving, all that stuff kind of took a back seat. So I do think that whole thread kind of moved it in this direction. So that's a very quick summary, but I think that contributed to this culture shift.
I had a thought. I don't know if this lands, but I just wonder how much, and I hate to pin everything on this, how much the rise of social media and influence has affected this. Because when I think back to, again, even when we planted our church, I hate to say this, I'm really aging myself, like we weren't that connected on the internet. I mean, it was, but we weren't even aware of, I didn't know Bethel existed. We weren't aware of a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think in communities before, we were so interconnected and the world became so small and everybody was exposed to everybody else. I think you looked at either certain pastors, maybe civic leaders, or certain people as inspiration for what does leadership look like. And so as people were actually leading by example, it inspired that. Today, we just have influence all over the place. We see sacrifice, we hear stories, we see people. And so I think pastors have become just one of many. I don't think our story, I don't think our example necessarily always stands out. I think people are seeing models of altruism, they're seeing things like that in many different forms displayed. So I just wonder how much in the last decade to 15 years, maybe social media has actually shifted, especially the younger generation that we're talking about leading today, anyone below Gen X, which is what I would be. So I don't know. That's just something culturally that I wonder.
Well, I think, Tim, before this generation of high access through social media, you had to lead to have influence.
Mm-hmm.
Now you just get influence through popularity or celebrity. And so leadership actually looks like a diminished value than influence. And influencers do not necessarily lead, they entertain. And I mean, they definitely influence and pull people in a certain direction. But if you're looking at leadership in terms of creating something that's compelling, worthy, life-giving, that seems a lot less interesting, you know? And so I think it's not just that the world shifted, the value system shifted, because people who had in their heart, even in a good way, I want to make an impact in the world, so I better learn how to become a leader. Now you go, oh, I want to make an impact in the world. I better figure out how to get known. It's actually a different process to what in their mind is the same outcome.
Mm. What do you want to
You got other questions for us, Aaron?
Yes. Hey, Nick, how are you?
What's up, guys? So thankful to be on today. Eric, so much richness in your story. It's amazing. Number one, want to honor Erwin and Aaron. I'm a battle ready OG from episode 1 all the way to here.
Wow.
And 7 frequencies of communication completely revolutionized our staff. So major thank you for the download. So a little bit, my question is, I lead an organization called Circuit Riders. It's a parachurch organization. We do basically evangelism on college and high schools across the world. And I built it with my dad over the last 15 years. We're in Orange County. 4 years ago, my dad passed away and I stepped forward to keep leading. And I thought we would shrink in his absence, but we grew. And one of the things that grew was like this local expression here where we started doing these kind of worship. It's really just a church service, to be honest, on a Monday night. We do worship, there's preaching, and it's grown now. It fluctuates between 600 and 800 people every week. And I feel this burden, like we've been this kind of like catalyst or evangelist all around the world. But I think a lot of our crew, we feel this desire to go deep into maybe turn it into a local church. And I feel like, though, if I do, it might blow up our parachurch thing, or it maybe is going to go good. I just need some pastoral wisdom from you, legends, on what are some principles that maybe I should keep in mind. I'm only 34. And so I just feel the vacancy of my dad's wisdom. He was a church planner before what we did. I just feel the vacancy of not knowing what to do and not knowing if I keep it as what it is, just kind of like a big Bible study with worship, or if I really become a local church pastor. I'm a little bit lost, need some help, some advice, and I won't blame it on you if it goes bad.
Well, I love Circuit Riders. Andy Bird is a good friend of mine, the coworker. So yeah, that love all you guys. So that's a very interesting question. Just with my understanding of YWAM, Circuit Riders, and just that whole movement, I think what would be interesting, I don't know if you have the answer to this, but it would be helpful to know why. Why a church? Because I think what makes you guys so dynamic is how you are as it is right now. I've seen different movements over the years, parachurch organizations. I can't say all of them, but the ones I'm familiar with, when they moved into the church, when they took a significant dynamic ministry like that and moved it into the church space, I don't know if any of them are still around anymore. And I think because I don't know if the why was strong enough, because the way the church functioned is vastly different than the way you guys run as circuit riders. And so it's a complete culture shift. And I don't know if everyone over here can actually move into this completely different. It's just so vastly different. So for me, it would be helpful to know why. Like, why would you move into a formal church instead of keeping it as it is? So that would help me.
And Nick, I would have maybe another question. Are the people you're reaching such outliers that they simply do not fit into the churches that exist? Because in many ways, that's why I started Mosaic. was that the people I was reaching simply did not fit in any church that existed. And so then I felt in not only a moral obligation, but a sense of vision of a community that could be created, that could exist where they belonged. And so that's when, and I'm not familiar with Circuit Riders. It sounds, what a great name, by the way. I'm like, I'm already a fan. And so I would just go, if there are local churches where they fit in great, that can help them have community and have the next other layer of growth, then maybe just partner with the churches there, because it sounds like you have a pretty dynamic ministry. But if you go, oh no, we have 800 people that if we didn't exist, wouldn't come into community anywhere, then I would go, that's an important why. And that's where I think you need to grapple with the why of going, who's stewarding, leading these people and helping them grow. And then, the two things you have to do is, like, you have to, one, will they give? Right? If they come on Monday and they worship and they're preaching, is there giving? Because a lot of times the break point is the moment someone says, hey, now we're going to start giving. And they go, oh no, we like coming, but we don't want to invest. And so some of it is, maybe you can establish a culture of sacrificial giving, even if you don't become a church in that space. And then also, it sounds like they're already bringing their friends, because if they're bringing their friends to your experience, but they wouldn't bring their friends to other churches, that becomes another compelling why for me.
That's what's happening. It's like half. It's growing, and that's the half that I just feel burdened for them. They don't know what to do. The other churches don't. I love the whole church. We work with the church everywhere, but it's a unique space, and I am raising all the money. They give, but it barely covers, anything.
Yeah.
Because the average age is probably 22 years old in there.
Yeah. It's like in New York, they asked me, hey, when is this going to become a church every week? And I said, that's up to you. When you give,
wow,
and to the level where we can do that, that's not a top-down decision. That's a bottom-up decision. When this community sacrifices and gives at that level, we know we're ready. And so some of it is maybe casting that vision and going, hey guys, right now, I'm investing everything to create the space for you. My question is this important enough for you to invest everything to create a space for those who are not here yet?
Wow.
And that will help elevate them just in their own personal life, which is, to me, very exciting.
Thank you so much, guys. It means the world.
Great to see you, Nick.
Yeah, same.
Thanks, Nick. And so sorry for some of those early Bad Ready podcasts. Truly. Okay. Hey, Valerie.
Hi, guys. I am a longtime Arena member, but my first question ever. So,
wow.
I know. Big day for me around here. But really, Eric, I was listening to your story of the past handful of years in Greenville, realizing that never would have been reality if you hadn't left. And I'm really curious about, and I don't know if there is an answer that is transferable to everyone, but just the process of knowing when it's time to leave, and especially a place that looks healthy and is beautiful things are happening there. But what about that situation, and how did you know that this is beautiful, but it's time for me to go, and I can't even tell you where I'm going. I just know. And I would just be really interested in knowing your perspective about when it's time to leave a beautiful season, not knowing what in the world. Like, I love how you said, like, entering a dark hallway. Like, how do you know when it's time to step into it? Or how do you know you're just kind of having a bad day, and you'll regret it tomorrow. I wrestle with that a little bit, and I'm wondering your thoughts about it.
Yeah, it's a great question. My theology around decision making is wrapped up in this sentence: God doesn't know the future; He knows the futures. And so that, to me, opened up possibilities. And I I mean, I could unpack this more maybe in the future, but I try not to, what's the right decision, what's the wrong decision? I try not to do that. Because if we moralize every decision, then I think we miss opportunities of infinite possibilities. And so for me, when I finally got to a place to recognize there isn't only one future, there's all kinds of possibilities, then that's what unlocked the freedom to think beyond, if that makes sense. When did I know it's time to leave? There were just so many dynamics. The only way I can probably describe it simply, it just felt like the grace lifted. What was really easy, and this wasn't a week or 2 weeks, this was years of getting to this place. And so I think for me, when I recognized that grace was lifted, like there was no more oil anymore, it was just friction. There was no cartilage, it was just bone on bone. And the more you tried, the more friction there was internally and just all the dynamics. It just kind of forced me to ask some larger questions. And that's a whole nother story of how I got there. But that for me, but I get nervous telling people all the details because um, I'm not wanting to encourage people to just leave. You just, oh, when you're uncomfortable, just leave. And if it's just leave. So that's the other side of these kinds of dynamics. So I do think there needs to be a lot of intentionality, thoughtfulness, and prayer and counsel and advice. So I would say when I went through all of that, it wasn't an isolated decision. It was many, many conversations, many hours of prayer, just a lot of a lot. And so I do want to emphasize that. And so the last thing I want to do is just give people permission to leave when it's actually an opportunity to grow. So that's the dynamic that I run into. So, but hopefully that's helpful on a little level.
Tanner, how you doing?
Hey guys, doing well. Um, so my name's Tanner. I'm from Washington, like 45 minutes north of Seattle. Been a long-time listener since the Battle Ready days as well. Eric, my question for you, kind of backtracking to what you were talking about, just the vision you've been trying to cast with your new community at Studio. I'm familiar with Bethel. I'm not as familiar with kind of what you're starting over there at Studio yet, but I was just curious, like some of the practical examples or visions you were trying to cast, but the community, you said you just needed to slow down and pump the brakes. Was that just overall vision you had for the whole community or just like parts of it? I guess the picture I'm having in my head was like, were they freaking out because you were using an iPad versus the Bible? Or I don't know exactly like how kind of, I guess, not into the future they are from where you're coming from. So yeah, what were some of the examples, I guess, practically of just what you were trying to vision cast and you had to pump the brakes on?
Yeah, I mean, you said you're familiar with Bethel, and so Bethel definitely emphasizes the Holy Spirit, spiritual gifts, miracles, the prophetic. I mean, those are some of its flags in the ground, if you will, stakes in the ground, which there's a lot of beauty in that, of course. For me, I have a value for those things, but I also have a value for other things as well. And so I think that's what created some of the tension as well, is what people heard me saying was, I don't have a value for that. I have a value for something else. And I never once said that. So I recognize part of my challenge was I need to expand people's paradigm to embrace more, not just only. So that's been the journey as a communicator, as a leader, is helping to build, to expand. I actually think one of my missions in life to this earth and to humans is to expand, just expand. So where that comes into play, I I don't know how much you've studied it. I've done a lot of teaching on it. So if it's intriguing to you, you can go to my podcast, Studio Greenville, and there's a series of talks I did this summer. And the three, I'll mention them just in case it's interesting. One is two words that changed everything, also called the two body problem, the three body problem, and the end of escapism. That is a theological framework that, in my best attempt to summarize kind of Studio's vision, not the entirety of it, but a really strong bulk of it. And it has to do with wrestling with the division between sacred and secular, spiritual and not spiritual, ministry and not ministry. It's erasing those lines and looking at it from a holistic view and understanding that secular is not in scripture. That's a human construct that started many centuries ago. So just So this sums up my vision for studios, that a much more holistic view, and that we are actually participating in the renewal and the restoration of all things. And that salvation is not only reduced down to my soul gets saved so I can go to heaven. That is obviously, I believe that's to be true. But I also believe that salvation, following Jesus, you're also invited to participate in the renewal and the restoration of all things. So, and I want to make it really clear, it's not that Bethel doesn't emphasize that. Bethel just knows what its main flags in the ground are, and they crush it. I mean, if you want to know where to go for these things, that's where you go. But I had so many other things that I feel like actually helped to advance the kingdom that I wanted to explore. So that's kind of a obviously very short answer, but that will be some of the distinctives. There were tinges of it in Reading, and I think I helped to bring it to that environment, but it never became the main thing, it is what it is. But now that I'm here, I can make this the main thing. So that's kind of the shift.
Serena, how are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Serena from Charlotte and part of the Arena. Eric, quick question for you on how did you stay grounded in the decision and knowing like what God was saying to you specifically for you and your family when like I can imagine like your friends and family had a different opinion. You know, I also growing up in a Christian home and having a dad as a pastor, you know, there are times where it's like, no, this is what God wants for you. And, and you're kind of playing that part. And so how did you navigate kind of those voices, especially when they're coming from like people that you love and respect?
Yeah. That I went through a lot of that on a very, very deep level, psychological level, identity level, and in many ways a spiritual level. So definitely familiar with that dynamic. Now that I'm past that massive season that I mentioned, I would say the couple of things I think of. A lot of people are going to have very strong opinions, so you have to just recognize that, especially if they care for you. And if you have, a large network of friends and family, there's going to be a lot of voices. But at the end of the day, it really came down to, okay. And at that point, my wife and I were entering into empty nesting because our kids were adults at that point. So who did it impact the most was me and my wife. And then secondary was our kids. Even though they were adult, we actually brought them into the process, which we found out later they were so grateful for. We have two daughters. And so at the end of the day, it kind of came down to that core unit right there. And then I also would say a lot of the people that have opinions are trying to keep you where they want you to be. They're trying to keep you in that can be good and that can be bad, but they're trying to keep you in that. And I began to recognize at least my discernment, it's like, and it wasn't an evil thing. It was just, we want you to stay X, Y, and Z. And I said, yeah, but ABC is calling. I got to respond to A, B, and C. And so I think recognizing that some of the opinions are actually more centered and driven by the idea of you staying the way they want you to stay. And I just shared this. I'm actually in Redding right now in Northern California, visiting family and friends, and I spoke at a friend's church in the same city that I pastored in. So that's a great story. It's actually really beautiful. And I was sharing. I said one of the greatest gifts in life are friends that transcend seasons.
Yeah.
There's certain seasons where you have a friend group, and then you go into you move or age change or life change. And then I've noticed and I only have a handful of them. And I don't need a lot. I just need 2, 3, 4, 5 at max outside of my family. And I recognize there are certain friends that actually remain your friends through all the seasons of life. And to me, that's one of life's greatest gifts right there. And so I spoke at one of that friend's church yesterday. And that's how I honored him. I said, I want this church to know that your pastor is one of my closest friends, and he has transcended multiple seasons, and he has embraced the Eric that he's become. And I would say the same for him. So I think at the end of the day, that lot of input and influence or voices, it really comes down to a small group, and that's all that really matters. at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You can get it if you can identify that. Now, when you're married, I can't just make a decision by myself. I make it with my wife. And so there are those dynamics too. So, but hopefully that's a helpful answer.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
Hey guys, that's gonna be our last question because we were about to wrap this thing up. It's been a 2-hour session, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I want to say thank you to Eric Johnson. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you, sir. Dad, just want to let you guys have the final words, you guys, you and Eric. So go for it.
Eric, thank you so much, my brother, for investing so much in all of us today. We're so grateful. And I just want to remind everyone of a couple of things. Next month, it's November 18th. 12 to 2 Pacific Standard, 3 to 5 East Coast, November 18th on Tuesday. So put that in your calendar. Let people know, invite other pastors, ministry leaders, or people who are on a faith journey because it's a great space for them. And then I just want to make you aware, in January 16th and 17th, we're doing a 2-day event. On Saturday, it's a 7 frequencies personal development day. For anyone who really wants to dive into the 7 frequencies for their own personal development, own growth, understand how they communicate, how to find their voice and master their message. But if you come for the 2 days, we're going to be doing a 7 frequencies certification for anyone who wants to be a 7 frequencies coach. And so all that information will be sent to you guys. So Friday and Saturday, for those of you who want to be a coach, and then Saturdays for those of you who just want to dive in deep into the 7 frequencies and learn about your own communication style and how to hear others well. And so we'll probably put all that information in the app for you guys. Next month, we're going to be featuring Pastor Kevin Liu, and we're going to dive into a conversation then. And from some of your feedback, I think that in December, we'll focus on maybe 2 things, but one will be generosity, how to speak to giving, how to deal with the issues of generosity and giving in that month of December. But I also think we should almost like dovetail it and deal some things with mental health, because I know in December people really struggle with issues of depression and sadness and anxiety. And so we'll kind of make that a double fold kind of December 2 hours. And next month, it's going to be amazing with Pastor Kevin Liu in KL. And so grateful that he's willing to get up so early and join us. And then we'll send you guys a schedule ahead. We're going to open the new year in January with a conversation on how to run a staff, how to lead a team. And I'll be talking to some of our contributors about walking us through step by step how they lead a staff, how they build their teams, how do they match casting vision with tactics and logistics. And we're going to make it a really practical one in January so that we can start the new year with the best tools for leading our teams and the people in our lives. All right, guys. Aaron, thank you so much for hosting us. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. God bless you guys. We love you.
Guys, thank you so much for joining our very first Arena Pastors call. It's a new space that we've created for ministry leaders and pastors and leaders around the world. If you're one of those, that you fit that criteria, you want to join, is $99. The link will be in the bio of this episode. And if you're listening and you're going, I just want to hear more about the Barbarian Way, you can join a book club. You can join our team at Mosaic, who are bringing book clubs all over the country, all over the world, and join that today. Be a part of our community. We appreciate you guys for listening to the episodes. Thanks for always rolling with us in our new experiences. We hope you enjoyed this call. We'll see you guys next week.